Hi everybody, my name is Coral Norheim and I'm going to be talking to you about emergency management in Australia. Australian management of emergencies and disasters is organized around a comprehensive all-hazards approach very similar to that of the United States. An all-hazards approach refers to planning and mitigating for effective response and recovery activities for a wide variety of hazards, including man-made and natural disasters. Comprehensive approaches incorporate all levels of government and non-government organizations in planning for, responding to, recovering from, and mitigating all possible hazards to a community. The main priority of the state and territories, as well as the Australian government, is to protect life, decrease the likelihood of injuries, and to reduce damage to property and environment. Disaster management and response in Australia is headed by the Attorney General's Department at the federal level. There are 3 divisions within the Attorney General's Department to help coordinate emergency efforts. These are the National Security Resilience Policy Division, which deals with emergency management policy, security and critical infrastructure. There's also the National Security Capability Development Division, which coordinates training, procedures, capabilities, grants, and mitigation procedures. And last but not least, the Emergency Management Australia Division, which manages requests for assistance from states and territories in times of need. The Australian government also works closely with the Department of Finance and Regulation, Geosciences Australia, and the Bureau of Meteorology. Emergency Management Australia is comprised of 4 divisions: Policy and Planning, Community Development Initiatives, Emergency Management Liaison, and Knowledge Management and Business. And the Emergency Management Australia's main role is to provide disaster management planning and policy at the national level. First response in emergency management in Australia lies with the local states and territories. However, if necessary, the national government and Emergency Management Australia provide relief and assistance when requested. The local governments attempt to respond effectively and efficiently to emergencies alone, and only when the resources aren't matched by the response and recovery needs of the emergency can they request additional resources and support from the national government. This is called a bottom-up implementation because it begins at the lowest form of government and goes up to the federal level. Australia's response procedures include working plans for an array of natural, technological, and man-made disasters. Hazards in Australia include brushfire, earthquakes, cyclones, floods, landslides, severe weather, tsunamis, volcanic eruptions, and nuclear emergencies. I've included the amount that the government spends per year on the 4 highest: brushfire, cyclones, floods, and severe weather. Because of Australia's diversity and scale, some hazards are more or less prevalent in certain areas, and thus each territory's emergency management organization focus their attention on different threats. In order to successfully implement a bottom-up implementation pattern in Australia's Emergency Management Division, the national and local governments must form many working relationships with organizations around the country. The forms of participation in Australia Emergency Management can be summarized into governmental agencies, non-governmental organizations, and international groups. Participants to Australian Emergency Management include police, firefighters, state emergency service personnel, doctors, local government employees, social workers, public health employees, land use planners, and other community organizations and volunteers. And it is said that volunteerism is the backbone to emergency services in Australia. There are many obstacles to emergency management within Australia, and I'm going to talk about 2: climate change and the inability of less advantaged communities around the country to recover effectively. So climate change is a major obstacle in disaster management. From 1991 to 2005, there has been an increase in disasters globally, and research strongly suggests that climate change worldwide is at play. Environmental scientists think climate change causes change in weather patterns and melting of glaciers and ice caps, leading to a significant rise in ocean levels in the coming years. This poses a major challenge to emergency managers in Australia because over 80% of the population lives within 50 miles of the coast. Predicted problems associated with global warming include and rising seawaters include coastal development, agriculture problems, infrastructure, and social and economic functioning. Another challenge to the emergency management system is that because the national government leaves the responsibility of disaster response to local jurisdictions, some of the less advantaged communities are unable to focus any efforts on mitigation and preparedness operations. These communities are referring to indigenous communities in this case. And because of a majority of these communities do not have the resources to fund necessary everyday processes and functions, let alone sponsor disaster preparedness operations, they suffer greatly when disasters do occur. When they do strike, the national government must step in, consequently spending much more money on response and recovery because of the lack of initial planning. Australia's bottom-up implementation pattern, partnerships, and all-hazards approach, as well as their in-depth experience with many disasters stemming from the continent's extensive variation in its vulnerability to different hazards, has created an environment in which a progressive management style works to create safer and more disaster-resistant communities. Any questions?